Welcome to the Speak Her podcast with your host, Camille Essick, the podcast where creators and innovators connect. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's a weekend. I know we're doing things a little bit different today, but guess what? It's okay. So what I need you to do right now is to like, comment, and share. Be sure to follow us across streaming platforms like iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We're on Facebook at The Speaker Podcast, on YouTube at Camille Essick, on Instagram at Camille.Essick, and y'all, be sure to follow us online at CamilleEssick.com, and I would love to hear from you. So send us an email at thespeakerpodcast@gmail.com. Without further ado, we have someone here that's back. It's been a long time since we sat down and had a conversation, but I'm so excited to have him back. The one and only Noah Love. Noah, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I said this to you before, but I am excited to be back. I think I had an amazing time, 3 years ago on with you?
Way too long.
Way too long. So I'm grateful that you invited me back.
Yes. And for those that are not familiar with who you are, just share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am Noah Love, reside in Brooklyn, New York. I am founder and president of Noah Love and Associates and founder and operating agent for I Am Models NYC, the author of Brand Therapy, and just a lover of life, a lover of Jesus Christ, and a Black man out here doing it.
And that you are. I just love your vibe and your energy. You bring so much value in conversation. Every time you sit down, you bring so many nuggets and jewels. So since our last conversation, we've always, when I have my brothers on, we always try to talk about things from the man's perspective. And one of the things I want to sit down and discuss with you tonight is just emotional fluency, meaning like the language Black boys growing into manhood, they're not taught, and emotional mislabeling, meaning when you express yourselves and sometimes you're upset, then society will say, oh, he's angry or he's being aggressive. Mm-hmm. No, if he's a human having a human experience. So can you kind of break that down as far as what emotional fluency looks like and why our young boys and Black men are mislabeled when they attempt to communicate their feelings?
So that's a heavy one. So I think when it comes to specifically just communication of our emotions in general, there's this innate teaching from our parentals growing up. I think in specifically the Black community with men and men teaching men, the idea is that we're protecting each other. So you don't want to wear your emotions on your sleeve. My dad often told me to, in order for me to remain in power, I had to control my emotions. And that oftentimes looked like a single emotion. I was to be aggressive. And I'm using that word specifically because my dad always reminded us to be assertive, to speak with a tone of commandment. But I think when you're talking about, I guess, mislabeling and communicating your emotions, I'm 36. I grew up in an era where the example of joy or happiness, contentment, peace for men was this monotone expression of, I'm trying to find the right way to say this. When asked the question, how are you doing? I'm okay. I'm good. It's always, I'm good. Everything was there was an epicenter of emotion for all men. And please stop me if I'm not breaking this down correctly, but
no, I mean, this is the male perspective. So
yeah. So, if I was having a bad day, I had to be good. And if I was having a good day, then I was just good. And my dad taught us that because you simply didn't want to give people too much control or too much power, too much insight to use against you. Without having to go too deep in that, I think that stems from the fact that I want to say during the time my dad grew up in the 50s, early 40s, for a man to say that he was having a bad day, well, you can't afford to have a bad day. You got a family to take care of. What do you mean you're having a bad day? You're making money, right? Like our emotions were associated with the ability to protect, provide, and be present. And so I can only obviously speak from my experience. And my dad only had one emotion. We were only taught one emotion. On the other end of that token, we had a mother who consistently said, I love you, who was uber emotional and oftentimes asked me how I was feeling, why I was feeling that way. How did that make you feel? What do you want to say to me? And as I say that, I have to give respect to my father, because my dad often asked me, how do I say this? How does that make you feel, and how are we going to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
That was always solution based. If you're having a bad day, let's fix it. Point blank, period. Right. And I think across the board, I think Black men, we have this experience. I think men in general, but Black men specifically, we have this experience where you don't get too deep with your emotion. Right. I'm good. I'll be okay. I got this. And if you grew up in a house that was religious, God got you.
Blessed and highly favored.
God got you. God gonna give you. And while I cherish that sentiment and I wholeheartedly believe it, as I grew up, and even as I grew up with my dad, we realized, God got me, but God also provided the tools for me to express myself. If you were having a bad day, son, have a bad day. Cry. But figure it out. Get better. Don't waddle in it. Don't sit with it. And so I think, I don't know any other way to say it other than Black men are taught to be one thing, and it's to be okay. And I think in the day and age, even with my dad being 68, he's understanding that it's okay to communicate the fact that you are having a bad day and I'm pissed off, or something has made me emotional, or I miss my kids. It doesn't make you powerless. It makes you powerful, full in the sense that you are a human being. You're having a full human experience. And without the rest of those emotions, you are essentially going to explode. And so, like, I teach my nephews, specifically my nephews,
right?
If you are upset about a grade you got in class, right, or you were upset because you didn't make the football team, or you didn't make varsity, let that be known, because that emotion teaches you something. It opens you up to understanding, did you in fact give your all during tryouts? Did you study? Why do you feel that way? Why are you disappointed? Are you disappointed because mom and dad are going to be disappointed? Or are you disappointed because you yourself know you didn't do your best? People, men, we don't venture through that journey of emotion. All we know is, oh man, she broke up with me, man, whatever. Lo and behold, that man devastated about women left him. It's things like that. And even with my straight counterparts, when we talk about relationships, when men aren't allowed to venture through the emotion, it oftentimes comes off as, man, for lack of better wording, she just a bee. She ain't really all that anyway. It's all of that clout chasing, or that power move.
Versus being honest about the actual emotion.
Or versus being, damn, I really liked her. Like, I don't know why she wasn't into me. Because then the fear of that comes with, well, why wasn't? Aren't you not doing your best? Did you not show up properly for her? Are you not her type? Those tough questions that come along with emotion. Not all men are built to face those, right? So I think, and I hope I kind of broke that down the best way that I knew how to.
Yeah, I mean, that was really good. I just think that in this space now, like having these conversations, I really appreciate it, because as a community and even as a woman, these are things we need to hear. And like my grandfather, he talked, but he never really talked about his feelings a whole lot. I really did not know more about his emotional side until after my grandmother died. That was the first time I saw him cry. He would talk to me about life and different things, but I never saw him emotional. The only time I saw like emotion, if somebody messed with his family or, business, I would see the irritation there. But as far as those things, not so much. And he came from the Depression era, born in the 1920s. So imagine that. What they call it, the silent generation. So it was just, but he always would talk to me about growing up, how things were for him. He was very comical, funny. But when it came to his feelings and his fears and insecurities, never showed that. But looking back, when I would see different responses, I would go, oh, that's what that was. But he never said, oh, I feel like you said. Exactly.
Because it brought something up that I think I ventured through therapy maybe 4 years ago now.
Okay.
Men, though we don't, at an early point, though we don't communicate our emotions very transparently, they're communicated through action or behavior. So like, my dad is not one to be emotional to your shared sentiment. The first time I ever saw my father cry was when his father passed. But looking back on my experience with my dad's emotions showed up in the sense that he would he would remove himself from people and kind of just stay in solitude and just allow himself to sit with this emotion, right? Or it was a conversation of empowering me to do something, you know? And I've learned over the years that many of us, we express emotion through ensuring that someone else doesn't have the same experiences, or they don't run the same, they don't run into the same roadblocks as we do. Like I'm a giver by nature. I'm a person who speaks life into other people by nature. And it's not because I was taught to do so. I do it because it's the space in which I was lacking. So out of the abundance of the heart, out of the place in which I suffered, I take care of people in that place, right? And I think most men do that. Women do it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Women are naturally nurturing individuals because there is a need to give. It is innately to give, right? It is love, it is to pour in, it is to nurture, it is to grow, it is to provide in a sense. Men, for some reason, we react out of a sense of lack or frustration or desire. So, for instance, when men date, the men who are quick to cater to be emotionally available at the earlier stages, it is because they are desiring that in return. So if a man is whining and dining you, if he's attentive, if he is doing all the nice things, sure, you warrant it, but he is doing it as a piece of or a form of communication of what he is hoping to get in return. So that would oftentimes, for my dad and my parents when they were seeing each other, my dad loves to laugh. And so his way of ensuring that he was going to get laughter in his life, having conversations with my mom and listening to her banter and her run on and on, that incited her to then tell jokes, right? So I think for men, it's something to be said about paying attention to the things that are not said. The things that are not being said or not being told or not being shared, they speak extremely loud. I've inherited my dad's ability to remove myself when I'm going through, and my friends, my family have realized the moment Noah removes himself, the moment he goes silent, that is when he needs us most. That is when he is needing more love.
The retreat, like going inward.
And most men, I think all men tend to retreat first before asking for help, before seeking out community. We retreat because we don't want to be burdens. We don't want to feel or seem weak. And oftentimes it's because we ourselves are viewing ourselves as weak first because the emotion is so fresh. It's kind of like, damn, I failed. I didn't do a good job at this. I let this person down. I think emotional maturity, though it can feel toxic to other people, when men try to fix it, they're first trying to understand it. And I would love for more and more people to understand, specifically the Black man. If he's not asking for help, it's not so much about condemning him or getting frustrated with him that he's not, or that he's doing it by himself, but understand that any man that is trying to fix it, we have to give them not so much the applaud, but share the gratitude that you are present enough to at least want to fix. But then encourage them. Should you need help? Should you want to talk about it? Should you just want to sit in silence? I'm here for you. Sure, we have the barbershops. We have the bro code, so to speak, right? Those of us that are in the church, we have the pastors, we have the ministers, we have the deacons. If I'm being completely transparent and completely honest, even those things are surface. I go to the barbershop and I listen to the conversations and I listen to these men talk. And they're coded words, there's coded language, but you also can see like, damn, he really wants to go a little deeper, but he don't feel completely safe.
Do
Even
you
in
think
the
it's because it was weaponized before?
Absolutely, but I think it was weaponized before, and I think it's being weaponized now, just differently. Because of the time that we're in, the whole sassy, if you will, there's that middle space. There's a really great area of emotionally in tune and sassy, unfortunately.
So
And
I
while
heard a man explain this, and this was a very alpha male, and I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just repeating what he said, just paraphrasing. He said a lot of it is because a lot of men grew up without a father.
uh,
So they learn their style of communication from the mother, the grandmother, the auntie, the sister.
yeah,
So then they get into a relationship and they communicate just like her. So now you have
sure.
feminine energy colliding.
Which, and I've heard that before.
But I'm like,
At
how
one
true
point,
is
I
it?
didn't. At one point, I didn't argue against it, but then I think about the way that I was raised, and my father
Mhm.
is present. My father is the alpha man. My father is homophobic. Okay, my grandfather, my uncles. I grew up around aggressive men, and I don't. I think it has nothing to do with the mothers. Because if we think about the Black mothers, for the most part, those of them that are single parents
Mhm.
or raising boys, they are hyper aggressive and they're that way on purpose. I think what the feminine aspect comes in for a lot of men who may, quote unquote, have effeminate attributes or style of communication uh, stems from this idea that, uh, well, I don't want to be aggressive. I don't want to be the angry Black man, so I need to be the opposite.
Mhm.
And while the attempt is to be softer, more approachable, sure. What is it? Nature versus nurture. It's possible. You're around all these women, you're listening to women, uh, female music, if you will. Sure, some of it has some contribution to it. But again, my father was present.
Mhm.
Love him. My dad's my Superman. Like he is my everything. And to meet me in public, to meet me as a person, I'm in a 6-inch patent leather heel on most days. I've had long hair since I can remember, and I've embodied both my parents. But ultimately, it comes down to simply what was innately comfortable for me. So I won't argue that point that perhaps it is because you're surrounded by women. It could be that because nurture versus nature, it's a thing for sure. But to look at the Black community, specifically Black women who are raising sons, they are aggressive. They know that they're playing both mother and father, and they are intentive
Mhm.
about what they're
That's
showing their
funny.
boys.
Yeah.
Like it's a thing for sure. But I wouldn't argue against it because it could be a thing, you know?
Yeah. There's just
Especially,
so many narratives out here, and it's so layered, and just really makes you think like, where did this term come from, and how did we get here? And so one of the reasons why I continue to have these conversations, we may not have the answers, but at least let's talk about it in a healthy space, a safe space where it's not combative and people don't feel attacked, and just explore the different perspectives, And so that's one of the reasons why I have these conversations, to at least explore. We may not agree with everything, but let's explore it. Let's talk about it.
yeah,
Let's have some emotional intelligence and have these conversations. And so we are going into this conversation even deeper. For those that have not done so, please like, comment, and share. If you're enjoying this conversation, please let us know. We would love to hear from you. Right now, I'm sitting down with Noah Love, and we're having a very insightful, in-depth conversation. Again, Noah, thank you for joining us on tonight. As we go into the next segment of this conversation, how do men survive the breaking, meaning the breaking of things happen that try to tear you down, adversities in childhood, transition in teenage years to manhood, when just those seems like the walls are coming in. What does that look like till we can get to this space and say, okay, I don't have all the answers, I don't have it all together, and I'm not just surviving anymore, but getting into this place as a man, as a Black man, where I can thrive and be productive and have healthy relationships and go forward?
I love this question so much because I think this has been sorry, I was sharing the lie. This has been something that I've been working through the last 3 years. Since we last spoke, and I think we may have touched on this a bit, I experienced 2 comas back to back from 2022 to 2023. And I think that was the most transparent, the most intense breaking of my life, because essentially both those comas completely shattered my view of who I am as a person, my view of what my life was, my career, my relationships with my family, with friends. It shattered everything, and not just once, it did it twice. And I think perhaps phrasing this as surviving the breaking, I wouldn't call it surviving the breaking, but rather the rebuild, because I think no one survives the break. Because there's a version of you that dies with that breaking. There's a version of you that completely gets demolished with that breaking, as it should. There is, you never put a vase back together the same way. The moment it shatters, it shatters. And I think when we talk about the breaking, we don't equate the breaking to a shattering. And it's always a shatter, because think about each relationship that you've gone through, or being fired from a job, or I don't know, bankruptcy, a business failing, a project not being seen all the way through. You're not the same after it. My first coma in 2022, coming out of that, I saw relationships that I thought were my rock completely go away. People who I thought that I could depend on, who would be at my side if anything ever go wrong, I never saw them.
Like it sifted out, so filtered out some people.
Yes. Even business-wise, there's a lot of things that shifted, but the most impactful break was I had completely lost an understanding of who I was. Because my faith came into question. Who I was to my brothers and my sisters came into question. Who I was to my parents came into question. The relationship that I had with my core friend circle, it didn't come into question, but it echoed, it magnified everything else. I was no longer just Noah Love. I wasn't just Kilroy and Jennifer's son. I wasn't just Jensen's and Eddie's brother anymore. Now I was this individual who had essentially created a life dedicated to other people. And there was a persona that was created for them. There was an idea of who I was, and it all came falling apart. At first, I thought, God, how dare you allow this? And to know my story prior to the coma, both my parents suffered addiction. And so I know what it is to be homeless, lights go off, be evicted. I went to 5 different elementary schools. I've lived in at least 20 different homes. I've lived in shelters. My mother is a survivor of domestic violence. I am one of 3 boys. I am one of 3 gay Black boys growing up in Miami-Dade County. Molestation, you name it, it has happened. And to have gotten to a space where I felt like I had arrived, I had survived it. God, you did a good one with it. And then randomly, I was in a coma for 4 weeks. And when I woke up from the coma, from my neck down, had no use of my body. And the only thing surviving that was the mindset that my dad had given me. Son, a man can't afford to be sick. My dad used to say that to me all the time. And the moment I woke up from the coma, I had a trach in my throat and I had tubes in my side. And the first thing I thought to myself, there was no way this is how this ends. I have 2 businesses. This is how I take care of myself, I take care of my family. I was told that I wouldn't walk for another 6 weeks. I started walking in 2 weeks because my mind could only register, you can't afford to be down this long. You can't afford. And I think most of us, most men, we have the understanding that I gotta fight because no one's coming to my rescue. Black men have always known this. No one's coming to your rescue. You have to be your savior. But what that also taught me is my lack of faith in God. Because I immediately reacted. I got up and I pushed my body to recover faster than it should have. I pushed myself to get back to work. Despite not being able to talk, use my arms or my legs, by day 3, I had someone sitting next to me with my computer. And we were going through the motions. I went back into it. So that was February of 2020, May of 2022. I went back into a coma New Year's Eve coming
Do
into
you think that
2020.
was stress
It
on
was
your
stress.
body? Yeah.
It was stress, but it was also God answering the prayer.
You were tired.
I was exhausted, but I also wanted to make sure that I was making the right decisions and I was doing what I was called to do. I prayed that God correct me. I genuinely prayed that God correct me. And up until that was my 30-something birthday, up until that point, there were signs of where to pull out from. There were signs of how to rest, when to rest, but I was ignoring them. And I was always taught, God gonna ask only but a few times before he actually sits you down. And coming out of the first coma, I share this story often. The coma, I tell people, I don't care what anybody says. If someone is in a coma, they hear you and they feel you. They hear you and they feel you.
I've heard that. Yeah.
From my best friends in the hospital praying for me and standing by my side day in and day out. But my brothers flew into town and Genesis came first and was like, brother, I can't do life without you. The baby boy came and he was like, brother, I need you. But I heard those voices.
Yeah.
And the story that I tell, the way that I remember it, I'm sitting at a table with them and we're deciding what's next. Like it was like an echo in the back. Brother, I need you. Brother, I can't do this without you. And God is asking, what are you going to do? You done? You ready to come? I was like, I can't do this. They need me. Again, I made a decision for other people. And I woke up because of the triggering of my brother's voices. And to know my story, my brothers are my everything.
Yeah.
Those are my boys. We were only a year apart, but those are like my children. But I made a decision. And from June till about December, I was upset. I was upset at God because something wasn't clicking. And I was like, here I am making a decision. Again, I'm living for other people. I didn't want to be here. I made a decision to come back because my brothers needed me. And it was an epiphany. I'm constantly choosing to be present for people. Will I choose me? Because what God has me here to do, I have to choose me. And Camille, when I tell you that revelation was so triggering, it triggered the concept of suicide. It triggered versions of suicide, how I was going to take my life. And I was like, I can't do this. This ain't right. I need course correction. The exact words, I need course correction or I'm going to take it. Meaning I was going to take my life.
That's heavy.
Period.
Wow.
Christmas, I was in Connecticut with friends, Mona Lisa smile, pretending, pushing my way through. December 31st, I was sitting on my sofa and randomly started having an asthma attack again. I went back into a coma, literally January 1st. At 12 a.m., I went into a coma. I woke up February 18th. And I woke up probably in the worst condition I've ever been, but there was a sense of peace. Because at that juncture, when I woke up, there were a load of conversations, and it was as if God was taking me through all 35 years of my life. And me literally watching things all over again. My mother giving birth to me, the relationship with my father, my brothers coming into this world, my sisters coming into my life, the schools that I gone to, the friends that I had made. And it was all ultimately about God. God has made it very, very clear. I have taken you in a direction that will save other people, but specifically, in the song, as I said, I have gracefully broken you every stage of your life, not because I needed to break you, but because there are people watching you, and there are people watching you recover. There are people watching you walk through these storms. And so I think to kind of bring this home for you, Black men who survive a breaking, Black men who survive the shattering of their entire lives, they have a core understanding that what they are doing has a greater impact. I've not survived, but I've survived because I was selfish in me winning, but I have survived it because I have understood there are spaces and time in which I have to choose me. But then I also understand that there are people watching me. And so should I give up? There are people who are going to give up. I'm always reminded that I represent a percentage of Black men, a specific kind of Black man. And I've had conversations with them. These are people who they did not take their own lives. They've been able to make their way through college. They can provide for themselves and their family. They've found and to be very frank about this.
Yeah.
A gay man who has a clear reverence for God, Jesus Christ, who is the head of my life. I have a strong understanding of the Bible. My entire childhood I was told that God would not hear my prayers because of my lifestyle. And had I believed that, my life would be completely different. Men who thrive through the breaking process, men who thrive through challenges, who can make their way from being, say, a dope dealer to a business owner, it is because they've locked in to a piece of them that is connected to loving their mother, loving their siblings, having a reverence for God, knowing that there is something greater. Don't know what it is, but there is something greater. And so to answer the question, there was no surviving the breaking, there was a thriving.
Yeah. I remember our initial podcast interview, and then I didn't see you. And I just figured, it's the pandemic. A lot of people were kind of in their own space trying to figure it out. But I remember specifically, like, you were there and then you were just kind of like, hey, I need a break, And when people say that, again, the pandemic, we were all going through, people losing loved ones.
Yeah.
But then you slowly came back. And I remember reaching out to you, and you very politely were like, I'm just right now, I'm kind of working on some things, not at the moment. I was like, okay, because you just never know what people are going through. But having you back now, 3 years later, I'm just sitting here like, what? So when you told me you were kind of taking a mental break, I had no idea it was like that. And I'm just like, but I always respect an individual's response because you don't ever know. You don't ever know. And first, before anything, I'm glad you survived two comas. Like, to have you here, and even though we don't talk physically on the phone every day, but we communicate via social media all the time, and to see you with your plants and drinking your coffee and journaling, and I'm just like, he's just so a vibe and just very calm and just scrolling. I can scroll and I'll see your page and I'll see you with your plants, your coffee, and I'm just like, oh, because it's just such a calmness to you. But you have such an appreciation for life. But now I know why. Like, you've always appreciated life.
It's different.
Like, hearing this, I'm like, no, he really appreciates life. I understand now. Like, jeez, I do understand the suicide part because I did attempt to kill myself at 24, 25, twice back to back. So I understand that part. The first time God intervened. The second time I actually tried it and ended up throwing up the pills the next morning. God intervened. So, and that was so scary. But so I understand that portion, but the coma part? Sir.
And most people don't. Like, when people hear it, it's like, what? And I do. I say, usually when I tell the story, I say it with
when
a
I
smile.
say you do not look like what you've been through. You know what you don't look like you do not look like what you've been through.
People often like the big eyes. And to bring it back a little bit, when you said about I remember when you reached out. When you had reached out, I was still in this space of shame.
Oh.
And I was hiding what I had gone through. Like, I was and it wasn't shame of the coma. It was more so one of what I look like. The aftermath of the coma.
Because you're a model and you live in New York, let's just be honest.
It's a physical, like, I went from weighing 185 to wearing 140. Was it 180? Yeah, 185 to weighing 145, 142. And I looked horrible. But aside from that, it was more so just everything that I worked for essentially came falling apart.
Yeah.
And my body was a physical representation of that. And I couldn't bring myself, I couldn't get to a space of peace with what had happened. And, I am very transparent on social media and try to be as honest as possible. I just didn't know immediately how to share it. I did put a post up after I was gone for a while, let everyone know what was happening. And it was kind of lengthy. But both comas, to your point, the appreciation that I have for life now, the person that people experience now, is because I understand when they say don't live for other people because you will waste your time, you will waste a life trying to please other people. I spent a long time, I curated a version of me that made other people comfortable. And my baby brother said this. He was like, "Brother, I love you so much more. Old you, I kind of like and tolerate it, but this version I love. This makes sense."
Yeah.
I understand that at first, but I look back at the way that I was posting or the things that I wore, people that I was hanging around with. I wanted to make sure that no one was uncomfortable with the gay Black boy who was 6'2" in skinny jeans. I limited what I was capable of doing. And while some people may disagree with this, the moment that I embraced wholeheartedly who I was, the way that God has blessed me in this last year alone, the understanding that I'm going to embrace every aspect of who I am, who I believe God has called me to be, who I believe He has created me to be.
And you're still here.
I'm here, and I'm here for a
that's
reason.
so yeah.
2 comas. You can't tell me I'm not God's favorite.
Yeah.
No one's survived, let alone 2.
Yes.
And
I definitely want to respect your time because I want to do a part 2 of this conversation. And I know the viewers and listeners are like, but it's getting so good. I know, but we have to, people have schedules and they have other commitments. And so we want to honor that. And I definitely want to part 2 this conversation.
Absolutely.
Because I just feel like we just tapped into something else and to go into it now is not possible. So before we wrap everything up, first of all, Noah, thank you for always trusting me with your story, your journey. I truly appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate the space you create. I think from the very moment we connected, you create space for people to be their authentic selves. And I think we need more people doing what you were doing. And so I appreciate you for making me feel safe to share.
Oh, that's what we try to do. Thank you so much. And before we wrap things up, just with the viewers and listener, do you have a nugget or gem, a takeaway, and then also where people can contact you on social media?
Sure. You guys can follow me on at I am Noah Love on all social media platforms. A nugget or a takeaway. Honestly, I think something that I've kind of just echoed. Choosing self is a power that many of us forget. It's not selfish, it's freeing. Choosing self allows you to do so much more for more people. I think if more of us spent more time investing in ourselves, listening to ourselves, loving ourselves, we will realize our capacity extends. I think that's probably the greatest example God has ever done for us in the Bible. He wasn't afraid to choose Him and be present for His purpose, be present in His messaging, but also to a very clear understanding that He knew when to take a moment and take a step back. And it allowed Him to extend His capacity. And so that's my takeaway. Choose self and choose self more often. That is more sleep, miss that meeting, call out of work, buy yourself something nice, read a book, go to church, meditate, drink more water, do more of those things that take care of your body, that take care of you. And I promise you, life will do what it needs to do to provide you the capacity, the space and time to do all the things that we're demanded of every day. So yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. And we're going to wrap up right now, everyone. Thank you again, Noah, for joining me. Hold on just a moment after we go off the air. Everybody, this is Camille Essick, host of the Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast where creators and innovators and creators connect. Y'all, so these braces are coming off on Tuesday. So this stumbling is about to... Yes, this is the Speaker Podcast where innovators and creators connect. Y'all be blessed. Thank you, Noah. Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Speaker Podcast. Be sure to follow Camille on Instagram at Camille.Essick, Facebook, The Speaker Podcast, or www.camilleessick.com.